Hello, dear students. Today I like to talk about a specific topic, types of communication. I have seen in various ways as to how to describe the types of communications, and I find them very difficult to understand. As when you understand or when you see types of communications, you will have different descriptions as to the types of communications can be verbal communications, non-verbal communication. You have horizontal communications, vertical, upward, downward, interpersonal, intrapersonal, mass communications. You have auto communications, you have meta communications. So what are the different types? You have diagonal communications. So there are different sort of terms used to describe these types of communications. So I want to have a clear picture. I try to find out the clear picture reading different books. Yes, they are part of types of communications. There is also a descriptions of formal communications and non-formal communications, and they can be used in the different context, in every context, in every terms that I described now. So let's start now. Communications can be categorized or classified on the basis of its audience, its form, and its direction. When we describe them or classify them on the basis of its audience, we can have interpersonal communications or intrapersonal communications, which is also known as auto communications, mass communications, group communications, organizational communications, meta communications. So we need to understand them thoroughly right now. Interpersonal communications is the communications between one person and the other, between one group or the other. Basically, it is between one person or the other, that is interpersonal communications. That is generally external in nature. There is also another form of communications, that is intrapersonal communication. One is interpersonal, interpersonal, and the other is intrapersonal. Intra means within. The communications that happens within ourselves as to how to take right decisions, how to manage stress, manage anger, how to deal with the difficult people, the understanding of all those things that comes under intrapersonal communications or auto communications, and the working at the subconscious level matters the most. So there are a different sort of communications, intrapersonal or auto communications, that is within ourselves. Another is interpersonal, that I have already described, that one person to another. This can be also in the written form or the oral form. When we talk to another persons, that is interpersonal communications, or when we write letters or notices to other persons, that is also part of interpersonal communications. The other is mass communications. You understand that newspaper, radio, televisions, all those are under the category of mass communications, where we address, why a particular news is communicated to a large gathering or a large number of people, and then generally it is like a one-way traffic. There is no feedback system. Another is group communications, when the teacher address the students or deliver lectures or deliver informations to the students. They are part of group communications. When we use multiple groups, that is part of organizational communications. And also we can have meta communications. When we communicate with regard to communication itself, that is meta communications. The communications that I am making, I am talking about communications and you are listening to me. So this is an example of meta communications. So now let's talk about another form of communications, that is on the basis of forms of communications. So on the basis of its forms, you have verbal communications, non-verbal communications. Verbal is where there is the use of words, like written forms, oral form. You have written communications, you have oral communications, or the spoken form of communication. Also, you have non-verbal forms of communications where there is no use of words, yes, but you use sign, different gesture, facial expressions, body language. So sign language, sign or facial expressions, body language, gesture, posture, they are part of non-verbal communications. So they have certain idiosyncratic characteristics. They are also different in different culture. We need to understand that. Another type of communications can be on the basis of its direction. That are horizontal communications, vertical communications, you have diagonal one, you have also, you can say, grapevine one. So on the basis of its hierarchy, if it's from the lower level to the upper level, it's a kind of vertical communications, but that is described as upward communications. And when it is from the upward to the downward, suppose from the manager to the supervisor, it is known as downward communication. So upward and downward ones are part of vertical communication. Horizontal are between peers, people at the same level, employee at the same level. They are considered to be a horizontal communications. In a class situations, I like to give examples as to when the teacher communicate with the students. That is an example of vertical communications. The teacher transfer the informations to the students, or you can say when the students communicate to the teacher, that may be considered to be upward communications. But when the communications is between students and another students or other students, they are considered to be horizontal communications. When the communications is between the head or the employee of different departments at different levels, we call it diagonal communications. There is also grapevine communications. Grapevine means where the source is not ascribed, where the source is not completely mentioned. So grapevine is like that. In fact, there are so many difficult terms that you have to remember when you think of the communication, the types of communications, but you have to understand them. Yes, when we think of types of communications, you have a lot of terms, and we are in fact in confusion as to what the types of communications is really meant. And I like to make it simple. Yes, this is a confusing part, but I like to make it simple, and in this video here you can know it. So thank you so much.